Walter Dean moved the mop slowly, deliberately across the polished hallway floor, his routine as constant and quiet as the sunrise. Each sweep was measured, careful not to leave streaks. The only sound accompanying him was the soft squeak of the mop wheels tracing lines along the glossy tiles, a whisper in a building filled with louder ambitions. No one really looked, no one really saw him. But there was a time, just 6 years ago, when Walter didn't hold a mop. He held the room. Back then, he sat at the head of the polished conference table on the 9th floor, surrounded by executives in leather chairs, LED screens illuminating detailed strategies, and bottled water labeled for each decision-maker. His name was etched into plaques, his voice the final say in high-stake meetings. Now, a worn pack of dry wipes dangled from his belt. His name tag read simply, Custodian Walter D. There was no title, no good mornings, no nods of recognition. Time and silence had reduced his story to a rumor most were too busy to care about. Yet, buried under the layers of dust and repetition was a reason so unsettling it could silence every floor of that building if told aloud. That morning, as Walter wiped down the chrome near the elevators, a young man entered the building. His shirt was a crisp sky blue, buttoned neatly to the top, but his eyes betrayed something deeper, like they had seen more life than his youthful face suggested. His name was Ryan Mitchell, the new IT support hire. He walked in unnoticed, unwelcomed, except by Walter. "Need directions to HR?" Walter asked gently, still scrubbing without turning. Ryan blinked, caught off guard by the kindness. "Yeah, thanks," he replied. Walter offered a soft grin and pointed. "Don't let Craig's scowl throw you off. Go straight, then left, second desk." That name Craig would soon become all too familiar. But in that quiet moment, as fluorescent lights buzzed faintly above and Walter resumed wiping, something shifted in Ryan. He had no idea that this janitor would be the first person to pull him out of the quicksand known as corporate politics. Ryan made his way to the HR desk, but before he could open his mouth, a voice, sharp and dry like brittle paper, cut through the air. "Who are you?" Standing there was Craig Dawson, floor manager. Slim suit, iced coffee in hand, cold, judgmental eyes. He glanced down, noting Ryan's wrinkled shirt and untied laces. A sneer formed. "Let's hope your work is cleaner than your look." Silence fell like a curtain. Ryan tried to offer a handshake, but Craig ignored it, sipping his coffee like it was an extension of his superiority. "If you're working under me," Craig said without looking back, "keep yourself presentable and stay away from the janitor. He'll only drag you down." Ryan's pulse quickened. His smile disappeared. He stood frozen, unsure whether he had stepped into a job or into a war zone. By noon, the floor emptied for lunch. Only Walter remained, aligning meeting chairs and wiping table surfaces with the kind of care usually reserved for precious heirlooms. His hands, aged and steady, moved with muscle memory forged over decades, like he had been there far longer than anyone who now claimed to lead. In the coffee room nearby, 2 employees chatted, unaware Walter could hear them. "You know that janitor, Walter? I heard he used to be some big-shot manager." "No way. How'd he end up cleaning floors?" "Rumor says he exposed someone and got demoted, but who knows? This company's shady." Walter paused mid-wipe, his hand resting on the cloth. For a moment, he didn't move. Then, without a word, he continued cleaning, but his gaze had shifted. It was no longer focused on the stains. It was focused inward, on memories that refused to die. Later that day, Ryan struggled with a jammed printer. He tugged, tapped, pushed random buttons. Nothing. After 5 frustrating minutes, Walter passed by, glanced at the machine, and said casually, "Pull out tray 3. The thick paper's stuck in the second roller." Ryan did as told. The printer whirred back to life. "How'd you know that?" he asked, stunned. "I built that machine," Walter replied with a shrug. "The janitor who assembled the printer." That didn't add up, and the mystery only deepened. Later, Ryan got lost trying to find the storage room. Walter appeared again, not only guiding him there, but adding, "Don't use shelf E4, termite issue back in 2018. Ryan stopped in his tracks. 2018? How did a janitor know that? That evening, Ryan didn't head home. Something about Walter had cracked open his curiosity. He logged into the company system and dug into archived HR files. One entry showed up under Walter Dean. Current role, custodian. Start date, 6 years ago. Previous records, unavailable. Just one cryptic note stood out. Voluntarily reassigned due to health reasons. Ryan leaned back in his chair, eyes narrowed. That explanation felt too clean, too rehearsed. Something was missing, and deep inside he knew Walter's real story had just begun to surface. Ryan leaned closer to the screen, the dim glow of the monitor casting soft shadows on his face. Deep in the backup archives, buried behind layers of forgotten folders, he found it. A snapshot from 6 years ago. There, clear as day, was the name. Walter Dean, Director of Compliance Internal Risk Control Division. The title struck Ryan like a jolt. A director turned janitor? His pulse quickened, confusion twisting in his chest. The next morning, unable to shake the questions gnawing at him, Ryan reached out to a name he had seen in the company's old HR records. Karen Brooks, the former chief accountant. They arranged to meet at a small cafe near the office. She arrived quietly, her hair now streaked with gray, age resting softly on her shoulders. But when Ryan asked, "Do you remember Walter Dean?" her expression shifted. She didn't just nod. She paused, looked straight into his eyes, and said with gravity, "He was the kindest person I ever worked with, and the bravest." Ryan lowered his voice. "Why would a director become a janitor?" Karen clutched her coffee cup tighter. Her voice dropped. Because he dared to speak the truth. He uncovered a fraud. Millions misappropriated and reported it, but no one stood by him. Ryan felt his stomach tighten. Who was involved? Karen glanced around the room, then leaned in. "The man you report to now, Craig Dawson." Ryan returned to the office in a daze, Karen's words thundering through his thoughts. Everything she said matched the missing pieces. The erased records, the vague reassignment, the quiet silencing. The same Craig Dawson who mocked him on his first day was the one at the center of Walter's buried report. That afternoon, Ryan was called into Craig's office. Craig sat behind his desk, wearing a smirk like a mask. "I checked your background," he said casually, sipping his coffee. "Nothing remarkable. Nothing terrible either." Ryan kept a straight face, but inside tension coiled like a spring. Craig stepped forward, his tone shifting to something more sinister. "Just some advice, Mitchell. In this company, people who know too much don't last long." Ryan stared back, forcing a smile. "Then I guess I'm not great at pretending I didn't see what I'd seen." Later that day, Ryan was assigned a task: carry a heavy box of paper files to the basement archive. No context, just a directive. He took the box, held it steady, and opened the door to the basement. The lights flickered. The air was heavy with dust and age. Each step creaked. And then, snap. The third step gave way. The box flew from his hands. He stumbled, barely catching the railing before crashing down. His heart pounded. Behind him, a voice echoed, "Calm. Serious. That step's been broken since last year. I reported it. They never fixed it." Walter stood at the top of the stairs, mop in hand, eyes sharp. "They made you do this, didn't they?" Ryan nodded, still catching his breath. Walter walked down, helped him gather the scattered files, and said gently, "Next time, don't go alone when they send you to the basement." That night, Ryan lay awake in his apartment. His thoughts ran wild. The broken stair, the buzzing lights, no one else around. Why give that job to a newcomer in a place so neglected, so dangerous? He opened his laptop again, logged into the internal system, pulled up the task assignment, issued by Craig Dawson. Note: have Mitchell inspect supply storage basement. Urgent. That was it. No reason. No explanation. Then a message popped up. From Walter. 6:45 AM West Hallway. There's something you need to see. At dawn, Ryan arrived. The office was still in shadow, only the hum of ceiling lights breaking the silence. Walter was waiting. Without a word, he motioned for Ryan to follow him. Through a maintenance corridor, around a corner few ever used. They stopped in front of a faded door. Storage. Do not use. The lock was rusted. Walter pulled a small key from his pocket. The door creaked open. Inside, dust floated in sunbeams slicing through cracked blinds. A wooden desk, a worn leather chair, and on the desk, a picture frame face down. Walter turned it over. It was a photo. Him, seated at the head of the internal audit team, smiling, confident. "This used to be my office," Walter said quietly, staring at the image. Ryan didn't speak. He didn't need to. For the first time, he saw the full weight of what Walter had lost. Walter's hands trembled slightly as he held the frame, but his voice stayed composed. "I discovered Craig altered figures in contracts with a major partner. I reported it up to the regional director." He paused. 2 weeks later, I was moved to maintenance. Ryan's jaw clenched. "They didn't even investigate?" Walter gave a hollow smile. "No. The report disappeared. The person who signed off on my leave request resigned. Quietly. The plaques they took off the wall, my degrees, my awards. They didn't fire me. They erased me." Ryan stood in stunned silence. Walter placed the photo back on the desk like a fragile memory. "I don't regret losing my title. I only regret I couldn't protect anyone else." That afternoon, Ryan sat in the break room, untouched coffee growing cold beside him. His mind chased one echoing thought. If they buried Walter, who else did they silence? He opened his laptop, pulled up the employee roster from 5 years ago, compared it to the current one. 6 names, gone. No notices, no memos. He searched them one by one. Denise Holloway, former audit team, LinkedIn, deactivated. Mark Irving, internal legal counsel, last record resigned for personal reasons. Both had signed Walter's report. A shiver ran down Ryan's spine. This wasn't just a cover-up. This was a machine, efficient, quiet, and ruthless, designed to bury truth. And just as he returned to his desk, still reeling, Craig appeared behind him. No knock, no warning. "Settling in well, Mitchell?" he asked with a smooth, practiced grin. But his eyes were ice. Ryan kept his expression steady, despite the storm churning beneath the surface. "I'm just getting familiar with the company culture," he said smoothly, forcing a casual air. Craig gave a half smile and placed a smoothie on Ryan's desk. "Late welcome gift," he said. "Just mango and banana, nothing else." Ryan hesitated. Craig didn't strike him as the smoothie type, and certainly not the random acts of kindness type. Something was off, way off. Craig leaned in slightly, voice dropping to a hushed tone. "You're sharp, Ryan. Observant. But just a word of advice. Being too smart around here can make people uneasy." His eyes glinted with a quiet threat masked as a friendly warning. Ryan gave a polite nod, but inside, every nerve was on edge, every instinct screaming. As Craig stood to leave, he turned back and added, "Oh, and don't get too close to Walter. He has a complicated past." That night, long after most lights had dimmed in the building, Ryan returned. His excuse, forgotten belongings. His real mission? Surveillance. Tucked inside his backpack was a discreet pet camera, small but powerful, perfect for quiet observation. He moved carefully through the hallways, back to the forgotten storage room. In the far corner sat an old internet modem, likely ignored by maintenance. Ryan attached the camera, angled it just right, facing the door. If anyone goes in after hours, I'll know. The next morning, nothing. The feed was clean. But on Monday night, at exactly 11:36 p.m., a motion alert blinked on his screen. Ryan opened the footage. The door creaked open. A man in a gray dress shirt stepped in, clutching a stack of documents. He moved quickly, stuffing the papers into a cabinet on the left. Ryan zoomed in. The face was unmistakable. Okay. Tuesday morning, Ryan arrived early. The building still lay under a veil of silence. In his hand, a set of master keys, borrowed for system updates. He stood in front of the cabinet Craig had accessed. His breath slowed. Click. The lock turned. Inside an unmarked black folder. He opened it. Page 1, Financial Violation Report, June, filed by Walter Dean, verified by Denise Holloway and Mark Irving. Ryan turned page after page, itemized evidence, falsified accounting, internal memos, and most damning, a full breakdown of how Craig had reallocated internal costs to inflate revenue. It was all there. The fraud, the signatures, the betrayal. Ryan's heart pounded as he locked the cabinet again. His fingers trembled. Walter had been telling the truth, all of it. He found Walter in the front lobby, mop in hand, quietly cleaning the marble floors as if the world hadn't just shifted. "I saw it," Ryan whispered. "The report, the evidence, everything you filed." Walter paused, mop midair. He didn't look up. "You shouldn't talk about that here." "They buried the truth," Ryan said. Walter finally turned to face him. His voice was calm, but his eyes were heavy with 6 years of silence. "And when I go back in there, sit in the chair that's been collecting dust all these years, do I pretend like none of it ever happened?" Ryan had no reply. Walter set the mop against the wall and sighed. "I don't want my title back," he said. "I just want one person to remember I was right." That afternoon, Ryan sat alone in the break room, his coffee untouched, his thoughts loud. 2 choices now stood before him. Send the report to the compliance board, blow the whistle, and bring light to the darkness, or stay silent, keep his head down, and protect his job. Walter's voice echoed in his mind. "I just want one person to remember I was right." Ryan opened his laptop, attached the PDF, addressed it to compliance@blakertailgroup.com. But his finger paused above the send button. "If I send this, Craig will know. And next time, the stairs might not just break, they might collapse." His phone buzzed. Message from Craig. "Meet me at 9:00 a.m. Something we need to discuss privately." The next morning, 5th floor. No laptops, no whiteboards, just a single table and 2 chairs. Ryan entered. Craig was already seated, fingers tapping an invisible rhythm. "You're smart," he said without preamble. "Too smart." "I'm just trying to learn the systems," Ryan replied evenly. Craig's smile never touched his eyes. "And you've found areas people aren't supposed to explore." From his briefcase, Craig pulled out a file. "Here's a transfer offer. Seattle, double your salary, your own team." Ryan stared at it. It wasn't an opportunity. It was a warning wrapped in gold leaf. "And if I say no?" he asked. Craig leaned in. "Then maybe this environment isn't for you anymore." Ryan exhaled, pushed the file gently back across the table. I'm not going anywhere. Craig's expression cracked, just slightly. You just passed up something big. I came to learn, Ryan said, and I've learned exactly who's running this place. Craig chuckled, but it lacked warmth. You don't have proof. Ryan didn't answer. He just walked out. And behind him, as the door clicked shut, he knew. He'd just crossed a line he could never uncross. He pulled out his phone, opened the saved video, Craig entering the storage room. I'm not leaving. But this time I'm not alone. Ryan sat in a dim corner behind the kitchen during the lunch lull, a quiet spot. 5 minutes later, Walter walked in, mop in hand, but with a different light in his eyes. I'm guessing Craig offered you a promotion. Ryan nodded. I turned it down. Might have started the countdown on my time here. Walter leaned the mop against the wall and sat across from him. I thought if I stayed quiet, the rot would fade on its own. But you reminded me, some people still believe in standing up. Ryan unlocked his phone, showed him the footage. Walter stared for a long time. His eyes shimmered faintly. If you bring this to the executive board, Craig can't deny it. Ryan nodded. But I need help. Someone who knows the system, the protocols, the people. Walter reached into his pocket, pulled out a worn folded slip of paper. Then we start with this. 7 names. The ones who once believed in justice, who signed Walter's original report. All of them vanished. That night, Ryan visited the first Denise Holloway, her last known address. The house was empty. A neighbor mentioned she moved 2 years ago. No notice, no forwarding. Then Mark Irving, disconnected number, online, 1 vague note, left legal profession due to stress. They hadn't just disappeared. They were erased. Ryan sat in his car, a hollow ache building in his chest. He hadn't uncovered a truth. He'd disturbed a sleeping giant. One last name remained, Eleanor Price. Still active, still employed. According to Walter's note, she hadn't resigned. Ryan drove over 2 hours south to the South Bay branch. It stood modestly near an industrial zone, its air gentler, its pace slower. Inside, a woman in her early 50s checked the registers, her hair tied low. Ryan recognized her immediately. He approached, voice low. Excuse me? Eleanor Price. She turned, wary. Who's asking? Ryan offered a faint smile and his ID. Ryan, intern from HQ. I'm looking into a report filed by Walter Dean. Eleanor paused, her expression unreadable, then silently nodded for Ryan to follow her. They stepped into a small, dim back room. The door closed with a soft click, sealing them off from the humming world outside. I thought no one would ever speak his name again, she said at last, her voice barely more than a whisper. But if you're here for the truth, then maybe it's finally time. I've held on to it for far too long. She sank into an old plastic chair and pulled out a worn wallet, the leather cracked from years of use. From it she extracted a folded piece of paper, edges frayed, folded into quarters like something sacred and secret. She opened it, revealing a photocopied transcript. The meeting where Walter was disciplined, she said, placing it gently between them. I kept it, in case someday someone came looking. Ryan read in silence. The document clearly stated the charge. Walter Dean is hereby demoted for disrupting internal reporting procedures. But scribbled faintly at the bottom, in long-forgotten handwriting, do not forward this to legal. He looked up, voice tight. So they knew he was right, and they buried it anyway. Eleanor nodded slowly, pain flickering in her eyes. My husband was fighting cancer at the time. I couldn't afford to risk our insurance, our stability. I told myself that staying quiet wasn't the same as helping them. She exhaled, tears lining her lashes. But the truth is, silence is still a choice, and today, I choose to do the right thing. Ryan felt something shift deep in his chest. For the first time, this wasn't just a lonely fight. Walter wasn't alone anymore. Meanwhile, at the South Bay branch, Walter sat silently in the employee medical room. A minor cut was being bandaged, nothing serious, yet his eyes carried something heavier, more enduring than pain. Then the door opened. Jackson Blake walked in, not as an intern, not as a man playing roles, but as the CEO. He sat down beside Walter quietly. "I owe you an apology," he said. "This entire system does." Walter didn't flinch. "Don't apologize to me," he said softly. "I've made peace with what they took. Just don't let others like me get erased again." Jackson looked at him, not through him, but at him, and for the first time in years saw what he'd failed to protect. That quiet integrity, when crushed long enough, can suffocate an entire generation's faith. "I won't let that happen again," he whispered. Walter smiled faintly. "Good, because if I ever fall, I want it to be helping someone else stand." Later that week, far from the towers of headquarters, Walter, Ryan, and Eleanor sat at a small, sunlit cafe. Between them lay a battered notebook. The cover read, "The Truth, Version A," a record by those who still remember. Walter opened his old laptop. The keys were faded, but each tap felt deliberate. He began retyping the original fraud report. Eleanor added her own recollections, who had spoken that day, who had looked down when Walter was accused. Ryan uploaded Craig's footage, scanned the documents, and added the falsified reports. Together they indexed it all into one encrypted folder, Truth 1ZZ. Walter hesitated, staring at the screen. "If we send this," he said, "there's no turning back." Ryan placed a hand over the mouse. "I know, but silence never led us anywhere worth going." They clicked send. The file was sent to one address, jackson.blake@blakerrealgroup.com. On the 18th floor, Jackson sat alone. Outside, a gentle rain dotted his windows. Financial reports, KPI charts, rankings, all stacked neatly on his desk. Then an email pinged. Truth 1 zap. Sender riot@internmail.com. Subject, about Walter Dean. What was never meant to be buried. One file at a time. The truth unraveled. Walter's original report, the video of Craig entering restricted rooms, the handwritten notes, the disciplinary transcript, dates, signatures, even his own digital signature, misused to validate Walter's demotion. His jaw clenched. "They used my name." Without hesitation, he grabbed his coat. No calls, no assistance, just a note left on his desk. "Out temporarily, branch 8, no appointments." The next morning, the drizzle had cleared. Walter was outside, mopping the steps as he always did, his gloves damp, his vest worn, unseen, unacknowledged. Until Jackson stepped from a black SUV. No company insignia, no fanfare. "I owe you an apology," he said again, his voice different this time. Walter stood slowly, no surprise in his eyes, just quiet understanding. "You read it?" Jackson nodded. "I did. I haven't slept since." That moment didn't need more words. For the first time in 6 years, Walter wasn't invisible. He was recognized. At 8:15 IEM, a message went out. "All senior staff and department heads, meeting room A, 9 o'clock IE. No absences." At 9:03, the room was full. Craig arrived late, smirking. "Another corporate theater session," he muttered. Then the door opened. Jackson Blake walked in, holding a thick folder. No one stood, but the atmosphere shifted. He connected his laptop. The screen lit up. Craig, entering the restricted archive room. Time-stamped. Jackson's voice was clear and deliberate. I won't ask who remembers. You all do. I'm not here to earn back trust. I'm here to clean house. He turned toward Eleanor, seated in the corner. And we start in this room. Craig tried to push back. That video could be a mistake. Jackson's voice sliced the air. You accessed that room without clearance. Twice. No logs. Then the files vanished. Craig, panicked, barked, I acted under orders. Another slide. Walter's demotion report. Jackson's signature at the bottom. That's my name, Jackson said, but I never signed this. Silence fell like a curtain. Eleanor stood, her voice unwavering. I was in that meeting. Walter wasn't wrong. We were. Craig exploded. You don't get to rewrite history. Jackson stepped forward. You didn't run this place. You buried it. He dropped an envelope on the table. Effective immediately. Your accounts are locked. You are suspended. Craig's composure shattered. You think this ends it? Jackson didn't blink. This is where it starts. Craig looked around, searching for allies. He found none. He walked out alone. The room exhaled. Jackson turned to the rest. None of us are guiltless, but none of us are beyond redemption. We fix this. What happened to Walter must never happen again. Outside, Walter stood by the door, watching. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. Later, in the back parking lot, Jackson found Walter finishing his shift. Same mop, same gloves. But everything had changed. I'd like to speak privately, Jackson said. Walter nodded. Jackson handed him a sealed envelope. Inside is an official offer. Your position, fully reinstated, title, benefits, everything. If you're willing, Jackson said, his tone free from command, just quiet sincerity. I want you back. Not to mop floors, but to help me clean up the entire system. Walter held the envelope in both hands. He studied it. Not the paper, but everything it represented. Apology, responsibility, and the chance to rewrite what had been broken. Then, with calm resolution, he folded it and handed it back. Thank you, he said gently. But I don't need a title to remember who I am. I used to think being a manager was the highest honor, until I realized kindness was viewed as a threat. He looked out at the yard where others quietly passed by. Older faces, forgotten names, worn steps. If you really want to fix things, Walter continued, don't start with job titles. Start with how we treat the quiet ones. Jackson didn't speak. He didn't try to change Walter's mind. He just listened. Then what do you need? He finally asked. Walter's smile was small, but it carried the weight of peace long awaited. A room. A table. A nameplate with no title. A place for those who are no longer young or strong, but still decent, to begin again. 2 weeks later, on the western corner of Blake Retail's central campus, a new sign was quietly installed. The Marilyn Center for Senior Workers and Reintegration Support. Merely Walter's late wife, a woman remembered not with marble statues, but with everyday acts of compassion. There were no reporters, no ribbon-cutting theatrics, just a gentle morning sun and a line of silver-haired men and women softly chatting as they waited to register. Jackson stood beside Walter at the understated opening ceremony. I've had the legal team revise the national CSR budget, Jackson said. We'll fund it, all of it. And, if you're willing, I'd like you to be the lead coordinator. Walter shook his hand firmly. Thank you, but I'm not doing this for a paycheck. I'm doing this so the forgotten will finally know they still matter. Inside the center, a gray-haired woman taught seniors how to use email. Nearby, a man guided another through an online job application. On the wall hung a black and white photograph. Marlene, midlife, in a simple summer dress. Below it, the inscription, "Kindness is not weakness. It is what lets people stand firm through life's storms." Jackson stood beneath it for a long time, his heart quiet. For the first time, he felt something rare and real. He was finally doing something right. By the third week, the Marlene Center buzzed with more than just seniors. The line now included younger people, lost in the shuffle of layoffs, contract work, and cold automation. One such person was Liam, a young man in a threadbare hoodie, worn sneakers, and eyes hollowed by too many nights without sleep. He hovered at the door, unsure. Walter approached. "Can I help you?" Liam looked down. "I used to do deliveries for your company. I failed an internal test. No one asked why. They just let me go." Walter placed a hand on his shoulder. "Do you want a fresh start?" Liam looked around at the room full of imperfect, unbroken people. He nodded. Walter smiled. "Then we start today. No judgment here, just opportunity." Later, as Liam typed his very first resume draft, a company white memo went out. Subject, second chance policy. From now on, any employee dismissed for non-serious infractions could request reassessment. Every regional office must offer one reintegration slot. At the bottom, not everyone starts ready, but everyone deserves a chance to start again. Jackson Blake. It sparked mixed reactions, some skeptical, some quietly hopeful. But the numbers changed minds faster than debate. A single mother, once penalized for absences due to her child's illness, was rehired with flexible hours. Liam returned as a warehouse staff, with a mentor, a schedule, and a team. Walter, now regularly invited to speak at branches, never gave lectures. He told stories. "I once believed being labeled a failure meant your journey ended, but it turns out kindness responds, if someone's willing to listen." After a speech at Branch 12, a young woman approached. "Do you remember me?" she asked. "Marie. We worked night shifts 6 years ago." Walter looked at her. The name tugged at memory. "I stayed quiet when they turned on you," Marie confessed. "I saw everything. I saw Craig delete the report. I saw Eleanor cry, and I just stayed silent." She choked back a breath. "I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just wanted to say, I'm sorry." Walter didn't scold, didn't shame. He placed a hand on her shoulder. "If I'd chosen anger, I wouldn't be standing here today. Forgiveness, that's what lets us keep standing." That evening outside the Marlene Center, Walter found Eleanor on the front bench. No title, no badge, just a scarf and a warm drink. "I was just passing by," she said, and stopped. "I don't know why." Walter sat beside her, no words needed. "I used to think if I'd spoken up earlier, maybe you wouldn't have lost all those years," Eleanor whispered. Walter shook his head gently. "And I used to think if I'd softened more, Craig wouldn't have turned against me. But some people only change when the truth stands in full daylight." They sat in silence as a city bus glowed under the street lamp. "How do you feel now?" she asked. Walter looked up at the center's sign. "I'm tired, but I'm not angry, because for once, hope feels real." The next morning, a receptionist handed Walter an unmarked envelope. "No name," she said, "just for you." Inside, a note, handwritten. "I was the one who deleted your report. I didn't hate you. I just owe Craig silence. I made the wrong choice. But I've watched what you've built. You're still standing, still helping, still not bitter. Please accept this contribution, not to erase what I did, but to help who you now help." Closed was a check. $50,000, 0 cents. No signature, just truth. Walter stood still, not overwhelmed, not angry, just quietly understood. Later that week, the center was calm. Walter helped 3 participants draft job application emails when a glass tipped toward a stack of papers. A new young staffer, Kai, raced for it, missed. Another hand caught it. Firm. Keep your hands steady, Walter said. You're doing fine. It was exactly what he had once needed. And now, it was his turn to offer it. From a distance, Jackson leaned silently in the doorway. He didn't speak, just nodded. Because some fires don't rage, they warm. Some hands don't force, they guide. And some people, like Walter, don't need titles to lead. They just need to be seen. If someone once reached out to catch you when you were falling, leave a comment. I have been helped. And if you've never had that moment, share this story. Because maybe, just maybe, you'll be the first hand someone reaches for. The journey of kindness has only just begun.